Hey everyone, so I've been diving deep into Girls Evo Idle RPG, and I gotta tell you, there's a lot of confusion when it comes to team recommendations in this game. The in-game guide says one thing, but honestly, just blindly trusting that can seriously mess up your progression. I mean, who wants to waste hours only to realize you've been going down the wrong path, right? So, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I've been studying the top players across a bunch of servers, doing my own testing, and crunching the numbers to bring you the real deal. Now, after all that research, I'm ready to share the definitive Girls Evo tier list with you. This isn't just some random advice, it's based on solid data and actual gameplay experience. So if you're tired of guessing which girls to build and want to step up your game, stick around. We're about to break it all down, from the absolute best picks to those you might want to leave out of your team. Let's jump into it. I'm quickly moving on to the video, and I'm ranking girls in Girls Evo Idle RPG. Before we start, if you enjoy these types of tier list videos, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Enjoy watching.
My friends, only 0.1% of viewers subscribe. If you like this type of content, please do not forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you in advance for your support.
The girls in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Wing Spirit, Hazit, Haim, Aponi, Chaos, Rocky, Houndfang, and Fire Lizard. Alright, let's talk about some of the not so awesome girls from Girls Evo Idle RPG, those characters who really shouldn't be wasting space on your roster. First up, we have Wing Spirit. Now, she might look like she could be a decent support unit at first glance, but trust me, she's a total letdown. Honestly, Div is just a better option, and they're easier to get too. Don't even think about investing in Wing Spirit, because you're gonna have Riva to feed later, and honestly, she's just not worth the effort. Then there's Haim. Yeah, I said it. Garbage. Absolutely no reason to bother with him. If you want to feel like you wasted your time, sure, go ahead. But if you're looking for something that's actually going to help you win, Haim isn't it. And don't even get me started on Aponi. Bigger garbage. Chaos? Even bigger garbage. Seriously, these units are just all kinds of wrong. Now, let's talk about Rocky. On paper, she might look like a solid pick, but once you actually start using her, you'll quickly realize she's really not as great as you thought. And don't even get me started on Houndfang. Like, why would you even bother? Fire Lizard might have that fancy UR tag, but it's all just smoke and mirrors. It's a fake high rarity UR, so don't waste your time with her. Honestly, these girls are some of the worst in the game. You're better off skipping them and focusing on characters who'll actually get the job done. The girls in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Toxishark, Tornado, Shaka, Gaia, Martialita, and Rapier. Alright, let's talk about the Girls Evo Idle RPG characters that, let's be real, you're probably better off avoiding. We've got a few here that just don't cut it, and if you're grinding for the good stuff, you'll want to know who to ditch early. First up, we've got Toxishark. Sure, it's better than Haim, but that's not saying much, right? It's pretty much trash. It doesn't have the impact you need, and you're going to want to upgrade to something. To something that actually does some work. Next, let's get into Tornado. Now, this one has its moments. You can upgrade it to 8 stars early on, but that's where it stops. After that, it's just meh. No real growth, no real power, and it's not exactly the type of character that will carry you through tougher stages. Speaking of not carrying you, Shaka is kind of the same deal. It's an okay tank if you pair it with Gaia, but honestly, it's nothing compared to something like Lotus. If you're thinking of stacking up tanks, don't waste your time here. And now, let's get into the real why are you still using these characters. Martialita and Rapier. Martialita is basically a worse version of Alistair, and that's just embarrassing. If you have a Leicester, Martialita should be out the door as soon as you can. And then there's Rapier. Oh boy, single target DPS that really doesn't do much beyond the early game. You're better off dropping it as soon as possible. These characters are all about starting the game, but if you want to get serious and really progress, ditch them as soon as you can. Trust me, you'll be thanking me later. The girls in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Icewell, Dolphini, Ponder, Panther, Dudo, Flame, and Scorpion Tail. Alright, let's talk about some of the not so great girls in Girls Evo. We all know some units are better than others, but today we're diving into the C tier girls, the ones you might think twice about using, especially when there are just so many better options. Take Icewell for example. She's got some debuffing potential, sure, but honestly, if you've got Sana, there's really no reason to keep Icewell around. Sana just outshines her in every possible way, like 10 times over. Same goes for Dolphini. She's a decent support, but again, Spirit Fox is a clear upgrade. If you're relying on these two, you're better off looking for something else. Then there's Ponder. Oh man, don't even get me started. If you're thinking about using him as a DPS, just don't. The only way he even starts to look good is if you get his exclusive weapon, but by that point, you're probably better off rolling for Sue. Trust me, you'll save yourself a lot of frustration. And Panther? Yeah, she's a solid F2P option for an Earth DPS, but once you start collecting Akash copies, Panther's usefulness just fades away into the background. Honestly, she's just a stepping stone. And lastly, we've got Dudo and Flame. Dudo just doesn't hold a candle to heavy hitters like Akash or Feather, and the fact that you might get stuck with him because of RNG is a bit of a joke. But hey, if you end up with a few copies, you might as well use him for a bit. Flame, on the other hand, is pretty much limited to full fire squads, which, by the way, are pretty trash right now. Still, Flame does have some decent stats on paper, but it's not enough to make her stand out. Oh, and then there's Scorpion Tail, who feels pretty much the same as Flame. So yeah, unless you're all about that fireteam life, these girls might not be worth the effort. The girls in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Snowwolf, Diver, Coldblade, Milkshake, Sheepy, Alistair, and Suvi. Alright, let's talk about some of the B tier girls in Girls Evo Idle RPG. I know, B tier doesn't always sound like the most exciting, but trust me, there are still some solid picks here that can make your journey smoother. So let's dive into it. First up, we've got Snowwolf. She's a solid DPS, especially if you're running the water squad. But here's the catch. While she's great in the early game, you're probably going to put her on the back burner once you start focusing on the powerhouse that is River. So yeah, Snowwolf's not your long-term go-to, but she'll get the job done while you're building up your squad. Then there's Diva. Now Diva might be chilling in B tier, but early on, she's actually your best friend. She's your go-to support character, and let me tell you, you'll want to invest in her. She can tank like nobody's business and keep the team alive longer than you'd expect. If you're just starting out, Diva will be carrying you, and there's not really another support you can upgrade as much as her at this stage. On the flip side, we've got Coldblade, a solid early game boss killer, but once you unlock the big guns like River, Akash, Sue, and Sana, Coldblade starts to feel a bit, well, meh. He's good, but not game-changing. And if you're lucky enough to pull Milkshake, she's got decent skills on paper, but she's a bit of a pain to get and doesn't really offer much more than your light supports. Don't get me wrong, her skills are cool, but you'll be better off focusing elsewhere. Now, let's not forget about Sheepy. She's a solid unit, but getting her in bulk? Yeah, good luck unless you're dropping some serious cash. If you're a whale, sure, go for it. But honestly, light supports tend to do the job just fine. And then there's Alistair, a decent tank for the fire team, but honestly, why bother when you've got Lotus? Alistair's more of a low priority unit, especially if you're aiming for the best fire squad possible. Finally, we've got Suvi, the new fire character. She looks great on paper, no doubt, but let's be real, you're probably never going to focus on her over Fire Drake. So, while Suvi's got potential, Fire Drake's got the crown. So there you have it. Some B tier girls who might not be your main squad, but they still have their moments. Just make sure to know when to focus on them and when to move on to bigger and better things. The girls in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Akua, Spirit Fox, Mirage, Windrider, Croco King, Crimson, Skyflamer, Key, and Death God. Alright, let's dive into the Girls Evo tier list, where we talk about the A tier girls, the ones that are decent but maybe not quite top tier material. These girls are strong, but they come with a little bit of extra baggage that might make you rethink your priorities. Let's jump right into it, starting with Akua. Now, on paper, Akua looks like a dream with all those stacks and buffs, but here's the catch, she's a whale-only character. If you're not ready to drop serious cash, she's probably not the one to chase. Honestly, go for Sana instead if you're looking for something that's just as solid but easier to get. Then we've got Spirit Fox, the designated support for your water teams. She's got a cleanse that can really turn the tide of battle. But here's the thing, Priest also does revives, and honestly, he's easier to obtain. Spirit Fox is good, no doubt, but I wouldn't put her at the top of your to-do list unless you're already rocking a solid water team and need that extra cleanse. Now, let's talk about Mirage. This girl is the second best DPS for wind types, and the best part is, she's way easier to get than Sue. Mirage should definitely be your go-to until you can gather a few Sue dupes, which might take a while. She's reliable, and if you're looking to pack some punch with your wind team, Mirage is definitely worth your focus. Speaking of wind, let's also mention Windrider. This girl is comparable to Mirage but a bit harder to acquire. They're kind of interchangeable, but if you can get both, they'll really make nuking the enemy backline a breeze. But don't worry about Windrider until you've locked in Mirage. She's your better bet for now. Next up, we've got Croco King. This guy isn't someone you should focus on early. To really make Croco King shine, you need his exclusive weapon, and unless you're mid to late game, he's going to be a tough one to get the most out of. So, if you're just starting out, don't worry about him too much. There are better options for Earth DPS in the meantime. Last but not least, we have Crimson and Sky Flamer. Crimson feels like a wannabe Fire Drake, though I'd say she's a little closer to Sky Flamer in terms of DPS. She's got some utility, but she's definitely not someone to rush to upgrade. Sky Flamer, on the other hand, is your go-to early game fire DPS before you manage to get your hands on Fire Drake. Her damage is still a little lackluster compared to River, but hey, she's all you've got in the early game. Once you grab River though, Sky Flamer can probably be put on the back burner. The girls in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Lotus, Fluffy, Feather, Fire Drake, Flash, Holy Light, Dark Wraith, and Dark Wave. Let's talk about some absolute game changers in Girls Evo Idle RPG, shall we? If you're looking to power up your squad and crush your enemies, then these S tier girls are where it's at. Buckle up, because these ladies are bringing their A game, and they're ready to show you what real power looks like. First up, we've got Lotus. Now, if you're not using her, are you even playing the game right? Lotus is basically the tank of your dreams. She can pull the entire enemy backline to the front row, which sets up your attackers to just tear through them. Imagine letting someone like Sana, who can obliterate enemies in the front middle row, do her thing while Lotus holds the fort. Oh, and don't forget about that protection passive. It's a lifesaver, especially when things get hectic. Next, let's talk about Fluffy. This girl is your go-to tank for the early stages. All you need is a single copy of her, and she'll tank the first round of the tower thanks to her damage immunity passive. It's like having a free pass to avoid those early losses. But a little pro tip here. Don't invest too much in her after that. She's useful, but the real power comes once you get a cache to 17 stars. Then you can really focus on bringing the heat. If you're in the market for single target damage, look no further than Feather. She's possibly the best at melting down bosses in the entire game. Seriously, even Coldblade can't hold a candle to her when it comes to boss fights. The downside, you can't pick her up from shops, and she's a bit outclassed by a cache overall. But if you're looking for sheer, unstoppable damage, Feather is your girl. Fire Drake is an upgraded version of Crimson, and let me tell you, she is so much easier to get. If you're into fire units, she's definitely worth considering. But I wouldn't rush to build your whole team around fire units early on. If you're going to focus on one though, Fire Drake is definitely the better pick. A solid choice, no doubt about it. Now, onto Flash. She's an absolute beast when it comes to single target damage. While she's not as readily available in shops as White Knight, she can still hold her own in pretty much any situation. However, a cache is probably your priority if you're deciding between the two. Still, Flash deserves a shout out for her consistent damage output and versatility in combat. Finally, let's dive into the Dark and Light girls, specifically Dark Wraith and Dark Wave. Dark Wraith is super solid and a great pick if you're facing off against wind or earth squads. Her passive immunity is clutch, and her damage is nothing to scoff at. On the other hand, Dark Wave brings something extra to the table with her debuffing abilities. If you can land the silence, you can start taking down way stronger opponents, and don't underestimate that 50% anti-heal debuff she brings to the table. It can totally turn the tide in tougher battles. And there you have it. These are some of the top tier girls in Girls Evo Idle RPG who will take your gameplay to the next level. Whether you're in need of a tank, a DPS powerhouse, or a master debuffer, these S tier characters will get the job done. The girls in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Sana, River, Sue, Akash, Priest, Asuna, Azichiti, Priest, Asuna, White Knight, Wainin, Nightmare, and Asura. Let's talk about the absolute badasses of Girls Evo. The S plus tier girls. These are the characters that not only make your squad look amazing, but also dominate in battle. If you're looking to level up and crush your enemies in this idle RPG, these are the ones you'll want to invest in. First off, we've got Sana. She might just be the best investment you can make, especially if you're going for the water squad. Trust me, I've put her to the test, and her damage output is insane. Her crowd control, CC, is like nothing else in non-boss modes. She can lock down enemies while dealing massive damage. If you don't have her, you're missing out big time. Then there's River, your early game hero and a solid deeps for later on. If you're just starting out or struggling to progress, River is your best friend. You can get her copies fairly easily, and she has one of the best high rate URs in the game. Whether you're just starting out or reaching the end game, River can carry you through. Next up, Sue. She's a powerhouse with the highest damage output among wind units, and if you think that's all, her lifesteal is off the charts. She can literally solo the front line with her insane sustain, which is why she's a priority in shops, right alongside Sana and Akash. Get her as soon as possible. Speaking of Akash, she's the Earth character you want in your team. Her playstyle is very similar to Sue, and if you get her, she'll be a serious game changer. Her damage output is brutal, often one-shotting same tier enemies, and her AoE isn't bad either. Plus, she's way easier to pick up from shops compared to some of the others on this list. Let's not forget about Priest. She's the best support in the game, no question about it. Her ability to revive and provide buffs is super valuable, but fair warning, you'll probably want to focus on getting DPS characters first. Priest is amazing, but without strong damage dealers, she can't work her magic on her own. Now, Asuna might not be able to revive like Priest, but her buffs are way better. Her damage spread is excellent, especially if you stack lifesteal on your frontliners. She'll make your squad ultra tanky while still dealing solid damage. If you're ever in a shop with her, don't even hesitate, pick her up. Lastly, there's White Knight. This girl is super easy to get from shops, and she's an absolute beast. Whether it's AoE or single target, her DPS is solid across the board. If you're focusing on the light squad, White Knight should be one of your first priorities. Unless, of course, you're going for Priest instead. Either way, she's definitely worth your time. And if you're thinking of adding some dark elements to your team, you'll want to know about Waning. He's not exactly at the same level as Asura, but he's still a solid pick. His damage doesn't compare to top tier characters, but he's much easier to get, making him a perfect option for F2P players. For those who can wail out though, Nightmare is a beast of a DPS debuffer. Getting him isn't easy, but if you can pull it off, he'll be a game changer. Last but absolutely not least, we have Asura, the reigning queen of damage in the game. I can't even begin to explain how broken she is. Her damage outshines everyone else by a whopping 150-200%, and don't even get me started on her passive rage skill. It's just ridiculous. The only downside, if you want her, you're probably going to need to wail pretty hard, but trust me, she's totally worth it. The video ends here. See you in another video. Don't forget to subscribe.